Churchill. The Western allies of America and Britain weren't as enthusiastic about heavy tanks as their German and Soviet counterparts, but one exception was the British Churchill tank. Weighing in at nearly 40 tons, the Churchill was born out of the need to improve the armoured protection on British tanks, and was one of the best protected tanks in the early to mid-period of the war. However, it was initially plagued by reliability issues, and was underarmed compared to German tanks due to it being rushed into service. Both these issues would be addressed in the later models, but the Churchill was never really able to mix in with the more premier German tanks. But what made the Churchill so feared was its ability to climb hills and cross anti-tank obstacles that would grind most other tanks to a halt. This made it especially effective at storming fixed defensive positions, where its heavy armour afforded it plenty of protection from dug-in infantry. Its lethality in this regard was increased with a flamethrower version, which instilled such fear in the Germans that it was said German troops never took their crews prisoner, preferring to kill them instead. The M4 Sherman. The American Sherman has in many ways come to symbolise the Western Allies' war against Germany. It was an affordable, easily manufactured, reliable and competent war machine, seeing action in nearly every theatre of the war, and was widely distributed to British, Canadian, Commonwealth and Russian forces. The initial model was a good all-rounder, being able to take on all but the most high-end German tanks, but what made it especially useful was just how adaptable the tank was. While Germany had to retool factories to start manufacturing newer tank designs, the Allies in the West could simply modify the already existing Sherman production line, and as a result, the M4 came in a mind-boggling array of variants for different roles. Rocket tanks, flamethrower tanks, and even amphibious variants were all developed, but perhaps one of the most important was the Sherman Firefly, a 76.2mm gun-armed version designed for taking on the bigger German tanks. For an enemy tank crew, they often didn't know what variant they would be taking on. Panther. With Germany having to fight increasingly heavier numbers of enemy forces later in the war, they began to invest in bigger and more advanced tanks in order to address the imbalance. The need for quality over quantity resulted in one of the finest tanks in World War II, in the shape of the German Panther, which took full advantage of the innovation in sloping armour. Sloping the armour increases its effectiveness beyond its actual density, and could deflect shells fired from a certain angle. As such, the Panther was a formidable opponent for any enemy tank crew that were unfortunate enough to find one bearing down upon them. To exacerbate their problems, the Panther was equipped with an effective 75mm gun, and was also remarkably agile across rough terrain. However, for its crews, it was a maintenance nightmare, proving to be mechanically unreliable. It was also expensive to manufacture, but as the old adage goes, you get what you pay for, and in that regard, the Panther gave the German army what was probably their best all-round mass-produced tank of the war. Its reputation would probably be more well-known were it not for another German tank that cast its shadow over all others. The Tiger I. Fighting on the plains of North Africa, the Germans found their 88mm anti-aircraft gun was very effective when turned downwards onto British and Commonwealth tanks. At the same time, they were developing a new heavy tank that was growing to be in excess of 50 tons, and it was decided to mate the gun to this new vehicle. Initially called the Panzer VI, it is best known today as the Tiger I. Few tanks can claim to have such a profound impact on the battlefield as the Tiger. It gave the German army an astonishing combination of firepower and armoured protection when it was introduced into service in September 1942, and its influence was immediately felt. No other tank ever became as feared as the Tiger between 1942 and 1945, giving rise to phrases such as Tiger Fright or Tiger Phobia. However, its reputation cloaked a number of problems that plagued it throughout its lifetime. It was not invulnerable to the newer Allied tank guns, and was overly complicated, being prone to breakdowns, particularly in the harsh conditions on the Russian front. Its cross-country performance was not as good as other tanks either, and was known to get bogged down in soft terrain, while its high fuel consumption limited its range, making it a logistical headache. And yet, the Allies never really shook off the Tiger phobia. Commanders would sometimes alter their plans in the face of Tiger tanks, while the Allied tank manufacturers raced to develop a counter, such as the aforementioned Sherman Firefly. The Panther was the better all-round tank, but the Tiger left its mark on the psyche of those who faced it. Yet it missed out on the top spot on this list for one important reason. The T-34. When the Germans encountered the T-34 in 1941, they were aghast at its combination of protection, firepower, and agility. One of the first vehicles to make full use of sloping armour, which the Germans replicated in the Panther, and equipped with a powerful 76mm gun. The T-34 devastated German armoured columns during its combat debut. It also influenced tank design for decades to come. The arrival of newer German tanks began to erode the advantages the T-34 enjoyed in the early engagements, but like the American M4 Sherman, a major factor in the T-34's success was its ability to adapt. This resulted in one of the best all-round tanks of the war, in the T-34/85. The 85, denoting the larger 85mm gun, intended to allow the T-34 to better stand toe-to-toe with the Tiger. This allowed the T-34 to remain relevant throughout the war, even if it was not one of the premier designs. Yet this tank takes the top spot for one important reason. In all, the Germans built 1,347 Tiger Is. Add this to around 6,000 Panthers. The Soviet Union would build 48,950 of the T-34-85 model alone. Picture the scene for a German soldier in 1945, looking on as waves of these highly capable tanks bear down on your position, knowing you may be able to destroy 3 or 4, but that there are 20 more behind them, and then 20 more behind those. And that is why the T-34 is one of the most feared tanks by the enemy of all time.